Welcome, everyone, to the Jake Dunlap Show. This is your weekly dose of real success stories from entrepreneurs, athletes, celebrities, CEOs, and the people that you love. If you've ever wondered what makes people tick, what are the weird things that happened to them in their past that help to shape the people that they've became, every Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern, you can tune in and get exactly that. The behind the scenes, not the typical behind the scenes, but the real stories that shaped some of the people that you know, love, and follow. All right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. I hope all of you are doing fantastic. Today's guest is going to be a fun one. She was named one of the most dynamic women in sales. She's been in sales for 20 plus years. So this is somebody that I can sit and chop it up with. We can talk modern versus, old school sales or what's still the same. She's a born and bred New Yorker, which obviously, if you know, I spent six years there before coming down to Austin. So I can always talk a little shop. I was back in New York a couple of weeks ago, which was amazing. And this woman is really dedicated to, helping people up-level their career, get to where they want to go. She's also active in Habitat for Humanity, New Alternatives for Children, and a bunch of other things as well, too. Her future aspiration, she hopes, to become a New York Times bestseller, right? Which I think a lot of us want to do. Anne's also a big fan, as am I, of Jeff Gitomer. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Ang McManamon.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Really excited to chat.
Love it. So yeah, this is going to be a good one. Again, I mean, you've been in sales, big company, small company, all over. So I think it's going to be a good conversation, not just for people in sales, but your story is also a great one too, that I think people can relate to. So before we jump into, kind of your sales career and what you've done, talk to me about, again, you grew up, like you said, in the suburbs of New York. Like, was there inspiration early, to be in sales? Is there something, I guess, that you kind of gravitated, whether it's family members, et cetera, into terms of things that influenced you early on?
Absolutely not, actually. So the one little glimpse of selling is there used to be this really cheap, discounted store, and you could get candy bars for, I think it was 99 cents. And so I would buy a bunch of them, and then I would go to school and I would sell it for more. And that was literally my first, oh, I could do this. I like this. This is fun. But honestly, after I graduated, I started at an ad agency in New York, pretty typical, quintessential sort of kind of marketing, communications, aspirations. And I absolutely hated it for a few reasons. But one is I looked at my account supervisor, and she was working constantly at that time, sending messages to her voicemail message system at home about work. It was constant work. And I'm a really hard worker. And I actually, in sales, you kind of work all the time. You never really are off. But I was wow, that's what I'm aspiring to do, when you're out of college. And then the dot-com boom hit, and I got a chance to work at a startup selling. So again, I never had thought about that prior. I was okay, this kind of sounds fun. I liked the mission of the company. I liked what they were selling. And I was I'll figure out the rest. I'll figure out how to be a good salesperson and obviously build relationships. Yeah. Interesting.
A lot of times when people have experience like that, they're that does not sound like fun, the hours, and this whole idea of selling is not great. What line of work were your parents in?
So my parents were immigrants. They came over actually from Ireland, and typical had an Irish pub in both Brooklyn and in suburb of Long Island. So service industry, hard workers. That's totally sales. Yeah.
That's awesome. So Irish pub still there? Irish pub still there or no?
No, they sold it, but my mom's still working and will never give up, kind of behind the bar, serving people and making people laugh.
I love that. All right. So you grew up around, that's, you get a chance to see a lot of characters doing that. Okay. And then again, and what you, in college, you, what was your major in college? Obviously I know you went to Roger Williams.
Yeah. So really liberal arts school, and kind of picked something that I thought could be general. And so communications with a minor in marketing. And so didn't really know what that meant, but, but again, I kind of thought that whole ad agency was for me. And I think looking at that client relationship and maybe media sales was actually probably better for me to get into in that type of line of business. But just the account management side wasn't for me.
Yeah. And so so you kind of get into this, you decide, okay, sales, maybe, this is going to be a thing. I tried this account management thing, not my jam. And then you go to City Search and you're there. I mean, basically for the whole 2000s. And in those, like you said, I'm going to teach myself sales, et cetera. What are some big lessons or maybe things that you learned early in your career around, sales? Because I think there's such a misconception to sales around, not that there's not artistic components to it where, maybe some people are naturally a little bit more charismatic or outgoing or can be outgoing. What were some of the big ahas as you were kind of learning the craft?
Yeah, I think don't take everything so personal, right? I think, that was a big learning moment, getting hung up on that rejection, learning to deal with rejection in a way where you don't want to dismiss it. You definitely want to feel it, but you don't want it to ruin your momentum and your day. And exactly, it's like anxiety before you present, right? You want to have a little bit, you want to be able to be okay, I'm a little nervous, but you also want it to be controllable so you can keep your confidence and you can really perform. So that was a big learning opportunity. I mean, that probably took me a while to learn. And honestly, I think planning and being a little bit, more organized than I was prior to that. Making sure everything was in Salesforce, making sure my pipeline was updated was only for the benefit of me, not just my manager saying hey, you have to do this, right? That took a while to learn as well, but I think spending time, just put away time for that was important.
I think that's a great call out. I mean, I think for a lot of people early on, I've got a story I've told a few times where, again, about planning and being strategic and not again, the data is for you as a part of it. My first job out of college, I worked for the Tampa Bay Rays, and there was this inside sales phone loop. And how it would work is if you picked up the call, it would skip to the next person. So after the first year, I did a scatter plot of all inbound sales and the times they called in. And again, my boss obviously didn't tell me to do this. And so I found these windows of nobody called in at 11 to 11:20, 2 to 2:40. There are these windows. And so for 2 weeks, I just answered the phone, Tampa Bay Rays, this is Jake. And then I made all my cold calls in that window. And my coworkers were pissed, super furious. And I literally, Ange, you'll appreciate this. I showed them the data. I said, guys, look, this is what I'm doing. You guys should all be doing it. And none of them did it. I'm like, what? I'm literally showing you, again, they eventually fixed it 2 weeks later. But, I feel like it was a good run, though. Let me tell you that. I just feel like so many people, again, it's applicable to sales, but it's also other parts of your job. It can be any job. If you don't have a way to look at data, look at success, what's working, what's not working, I feel like there's a lot of people that are reliant on other people's feedback and their boss or whoever's to improve themselves or to get better. And I think, what you mentioned there about proper planning and thinking it through and entering your data for you, how can you get better if you don't know? And I feel like that's something that a lot of people have, I don't know if it's forgotten, but it certainly feels that way, that it's more and more people feel like they're doing it for other people versus understanding the impact that it can have on them.
Yeah. It's something obviously in the industry that we're in, it's really hard to help somebody that doesn't see the light, doesn't want the help. Right. And so for me, with sales trainings and, I want buy-in obviously, but I also need commitment, and I need, people to be engaged and wanting to learn, that willingness to get better, because sales to me is you never peak. You never just all right, I know everything. I got my sales process down. I'm the best closer. I negotiate like a champ. No, you can always get better. Always. And it's admitting to yourself, yeah, you know what? I need to get better at this, or seeking help. And so that to me is it shows a great sign of a character, like a human and a salesperson when they like seek getting better. They want that help, you know? And so, anyway, I'm sure you see that a lot in your world. And, you know, if there's resistance, it's just the learning just kind of gets capped there.
That's right. And something I've learned in my career as a leader, and, you know, honestly, I still don't think I'm as good at it as I wish I was, is like, you can't want something for somebody more than they want it for themselves. And, you know, I think sometimes as a leader, you know, if you're a good leader, you think of your job to help people to grow, get on their path, like whatever growth is for them, not my definition of growth, but, you know, people do have to be open to it. And we do a lot of work with, you know, around leadership development and coaching. And there's a lot of like coaching principles around coactive, like there's got to be a two-way street, or if I'm just telling you these things, it's, you know, it's for myself. It's not even for you. And so you're there for 10 years. And then you go to Guilt Group, which is very
way too long, by the way. One of my biggest career mistakes, but go ahead.
I mean, look, here's the thing. It sets you on the path, right, to what you're doing now. And what I love is then you go to Guilt, which, I mean, for those of you who don't remember Guilt, this is like the Guilt was popping. Right. You can Google it. But I remember Guilt Group. I think I just moved to New York right whenever you left. I think because we moved in, February of 2012 is when we moved. I think that's when you left. You know, again, like how did you, and then you ended up going kind of like big company, Amazon. So talk about kind of like those decisions, you know, what made you leave City Search after being there for so long? And then, you know, the opportunity at Guilt, then HopStop, and how that led you to Amazon, where, you know, I know that was a pretty transformative move for you.
Yeah. So I think after being somewhere for that long, 9 years, I was kind of, you know, I was too complacent, right? And I was doing the job with my hands tied behind my back, and that's not good. So like I wasn't like actively seeking growth, and I was like, wow, I need to go fly my wings. I need to go learn something and be in a different environment. So back then, good transition was for HopStop, excuse me. For people that don't know that, it was a pretty significant transit, like point A to point B app that people loved. And so that was a good transition. I knew the founder and the CEO. And then Guilt Group was the hottest startup in New York at that time. And
by far. It's like Tumblr.
Right?
It's like Tumblr and
totally.
Guilt. We're like the two in New York. You know, when I got there in 2012, it was certainly, that was the case.
Yeah. And they took, you know, just for people listening, they took, you know, that, you know, flash sale model, 12 o'clock, people were on, and it was like, you know, what's on sale, that e-commerce kind of experience. So I was at Guilt City, which was more about, you know, great things to do, amazing experiences to do in your city. So not kind of clothes and the e-commerce platform. It was more about experiences. And that to me was a good transition from what I had been doing, selling SMBs and being able to have a very large network of restaurants, bars, spas, and businesses that could curate a really great experience for our Guild members. So we launched in specific cities, and it was great. But we were kind of the smaller part of Guild, let's be honest. And it was great because for me, I started to grow in different ways. I started to become really a stronger leader, working with other executives at a higher level. That's a really part of people's careers, right? You could be a leader, a manager, or director, but once you get into a smaller company where now you have to talk to the CMO, the CEO daily about sales and your performance, it's a little different. And so I like that small aspect. And at that time, there were a lot of the big players, Groupon, Living Social, and Amazon, that wanted to get into kind of that online couponing. And so not necessarily an experience, but more of like just, hey, $10 for a $20, you know, entree at a restaurant. And so it was an opportunity to work at you know, one of the big five, to really to get in at a large tech company where I was passionate about kind of all products and really build a team. I love scaling and growing sales teams. I love saying, all right, this is a new venture. This is basically our business plan. And you got to hire a team of 40 people. nationwide, and here's their role, and this is kind of what we're going to do. And so that was it at Amazon. We were late to the game as far as the Groupons and Living Social, but we had the brand and we had the name, and we were able to get in pretty quick.
Amazon restaurants. I was like, man, did I ever use Amazon restaurants? Again, like it was one, because you were like, that was that hype period, man. Living Social, you could go to Cabo for $600, and all those were popping at the same time. And, and again, I had to imagine, because again, like this was kind of a startup, right, within Amazon, right, where you were able to come in and be the global, head of sales. And did you move to London, or you helped to open the London office? I know that was a big experience. Yeah.
I did. Yeah. I moved to London. For a couple of months. And they were just had a little bit later of a start with us. So it was more about how we hired, how we planned kind of our first launch, the type of brands we really wanted to go after, and then just helping the sales people there. So that was just really fun and interesting. But yeah, I mean, like every big company, they tend to pick and choose like what they want to continue to invest in. Right. And I think that was kind of lower on the totem pole, if you will, for Amazon's main business. And so it fizzled out. And the hype, right? Like that was a rev share model. All of those companies that you mentioned, right? And to get more hot brands and coveted brands, you would just like cut that rev share and continue to cut it. And it was just like, I don't know how we're competing anymore, right? It wasn't worth it.
Right.
Cost of
well,
sale
I mean, it's not that Amazon does that now. Kidding. That Amazon never does that to their partners now. So, but then, I mean, like, look, and again, talk about like kind of going to the right place. And then you go to Stack Overflow, which obviously at the time, for those who don't know, Stack was originally, called like the largest site for, developers, like a Git type model. And then they kind of went into a few different areas. I know the job space and a few others, but again, like, great company. And again, like what was that transition like? As Amazon, I guess, it wasn't kind of working out there, obviously to come in as the director of sales for North America at a company that's growing like Stack had to be a good, or great, experience going through that like real rapid growth phase.
Yeah. So look, Jake, I didn't know a damn thing about developers. I'm not a developer. I never will be one. not a chance. I'm such a salesperson, but I love the people I met with there when I was interviewing. I loved what they were doing, right? It was the number one site in the world for developers, and we were building out a hiring platform, which made sense. I knew it was so hard to hire. Yeah, it was so hard to hire developers. I know it is. And so, and they emphasized on culture, and that just got me. I am a big stickler for good company culture, of course, but then also building a great sales culture. And I want, obviously we all want as sales leaders, I want diversity. I want people to have fun and be really passionate about what they're selling, or go sell something that you're passionate about. Like don't be miserable selling the thing you're selling. It's just, to me, it's, about collaborating. It's about wanting to get better, like I mentioned earlier. And it's just being happy, because that will emulate with the people you talk to and your clients. And so I just was like, all right, I'm going to learn this industry. I'm going to get to know developers better. And then also, for the first time in my career, saw one of the best cultures, both on the sales team and also the company. Honestly. So I was like, wow, this is embedded in me. And now I'm going to take some of the things that we did there and make sure that I, as a leader, I'm responsible to hold like a great culture going forward, because of the things I've learned and was part of.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting, I mean, even just hearing you kind of as you're picking up these different pieces, I think so many people in their career, the thing you haven't talked about is money. And I'm sure obviously these jobs weren't low paying jobs, but it's I think so many people, as they're thinking about their career, whether it's a career in sales or a career in whatever, I don't care, finance, IT, doesn't really matter. It seems like throughout your career, and again, I think some of these times we do it consciously and other times it's subconsciously, you're kind of picking up these different skill sets. And it sounds like, again, it's the ability. And I tell people this too. It's like the beauty in working in a startup is, what you mentioned, you get a chance to kind of get exposure and do these things. The beauty of working at a little bit more established company, and Stack, wasn't a giant company and you worked at, Amazon as a part of a division, is you also get to see how good, what good looks like. You get a chance to see, oh, well, I've been struggling doing it this way. And I've had people push back on me when I post about, I think people should work at a larger company at some point in their career to get that operating framework. And so, what made you leave? Like, what was it for you? Again, like, you had almost a 3-year kind of like, successful growth. I know Stack during that time was doing, really well. What made you say, okay, I've started to look, picked up this, I've picked up this, I've learned this. What made you now say, okay, now I want to go do something else?
Just my career growth, right? I had an amazing SVP. He wasn't going anywhere. And at that point, I wanted to be a VP, right? I was ready to take the next challenge of, I was senior director for a couple of years. I was ready to put, more pressure on myself, if you will, but also learn the skills of, kind of running the full sales division. So Notel was another hot startup in New York that ended very, very poorly. Not as poorly as WeWork, but pretty bad. It's a great idea. And it was an underdog, right? Like, it wasn't competing against the WeWorks. It was, just full office space, right? 1-year deal instead of taking a 10-year deal for startups and for small companies. It's a no-brainer. Or for big companies expanding into different cities. It was great. So we were revolutionizing like the workspace, and we weren't co-working. We were different. And God, it was so fun. The people there and the mission we had, and like the work, blood, sweat, and tears we put into that company was pretty amazing. And so again, and to your point, I, for some reason along the way, have chosen to go into different industries, right? In different sectors. And I think that's made me more of a well-rounded sales leader, Jake. I hope, right? Like, that's my claim to fame. I think I've seen really different, like I said, industries, sales process, and types of kind of like ups and downs, whether it's your, 0 to 10 million, whether you're, 50 to a billion, right? So a unicorn status is where we went at Notel. So I like to think that gives me a little bit more street cred. But yeah, it's not like I spent, 20 years in one industry and I'm such the expert in one thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, like what you did is you look for growth, you look for opportunities that would stretch you. And again, I think it's, a lot of people get focused. I mean, look, there's a lot to be said about being in an industry for a long time, right? You can continue to build that reputation. And like you said, just there's only so many growth opportunities. And so these different perspectives, I think many times when things happen in our career, maybe we feel derailed. I know certainly for me, my first 2.5 years were in sports, and I told my boss to then I got fired. I thought my life was over. And then I got into tech, and it like changed my life for forever. And so we all have these kind of paths. And so, we don't have to get it perfect, and we don't have the ability to kind of recognize the learnings that we have until much later as a part of it. And so how did you then decide? So Notel doing well for a long time, and then all of a sudden it's caught up in this, world of like not quite continuing to raise funds and didn't quite take off the way I think people thought it would. And, what then made you come to your Proxy Click? So you kind of then you kind of start to make the transition into more of like a, kind of like an ad tech SaaS world.
Pure SaaS. Yeah. Yeah. I've always flirted with SaaS, but never had, that concrete background. And so that was one decision. I need to get better at SaaS. And then obviously COVID took a big hit on Notel. And so with Proxy Click, I was like, it was pure SaaS. It was a European-based company. They wanted to grow in Americas. It was easy for me to kind of be a leader. I've worked obviously in EMEA, and I've run sales teams there. So it was a very good transition. Really great culture. Again, going back to product was superior, culture was even better. You blend those two and you kind of have the perfect storm. And so it was a good transition for me. And those were weird times, right? Like, I think about it, June 2020, it was a weird time, right? We didn't know what the hell was going on in the world. And people started to pick up hiring. I do remember that. It got pretty crazy. And then, of course, 6 months later, the fundings were crazy as well. So it was great to learning. It was a little bit more of a technical sale, learning how to kind of navigate through that. And, wasn't proactively looking. And again, I tend to like big brand names, whether it's a smaller company or not. Crunchbase kind of came knocking on my door.
Got it. All right. So you have this good opportunity, and then Crunchbase comes over, which is where you are now. So to kind of look back, how did you stay hungry throughout? And I think, look, what happens is sometimes, just as this person's got X years of experience, et cetera. And so they just get promoted and move from company to company. How were you continuing to stay intentional about your own growth? Because I think, again, you've had kind of these different titles, and sometimes, again, you take a senior director, but then go back to a global head. How did you think about your own growth? And how do you kind of, and maybe even today, how do you kind of stay hungry and, not necessarily the books that you read, but like from a mindset standpoint?
I like just increasing my network. I love talking to sales leaders just to kind of hear their challenges and how they deal kind of day to day. Like a big topic was obviously, running sales teams in this remote world, right? We've been talking about that for a while, and it's still hard as hell. Like, I don't care. There's no one magic trick there. And so for me, I think it's, again, having a big network and being able to kind of lean on people and really ask really candid questions. It's also, looking at what I kind of do an assessment every few months of like, what have I been really good at lately? And what do I just like run away from? What am I just like procrastinating on and or trying to avoid? And that's just a big thing professionally and personally, right? Looking at like, okay, you know what? I need to, do this, whatever it is, because I'm avoiding it. And there's a reason why. So looking at things like that tend to give me like, hey, I need to get better at this and or, figure out a way to learn.
How do you build that time in? Again, I talk a lot about this. I was talking to one of my senior leaders this morning, and I told her I've got this kind of principle. I call it 80-15-5, which is 80% of your time is spent on the things that are going to impact the short term, 15% on kind of short, medium, and then 5% on longer term, things, 6 to 12 months, maybe 24-month timelines. And what I see is many people don't take that time, like you just mentioned, to reflect. And I just see them get stuck on the wheel. They just execute, with all these broken processes. How are you able, from a time management standpoint, to create space for thinking, and to be able to, be self-reflective? Do you have a routine that you follow, or, how do you think about balancing the short-term and the, mid or long-term needs, for yourself and, where you want to go?
It's really hard. I have to say, I probably don't have one clean way of doing it. I think, twice a year at Crunchbase currently, we, kind of look at our impact plans, right? We kind of do the self-review and get reviews. And that to me is a great time. That's a forced time, right? That I know that I have to kind of think about my last 6 months, how I impacted the company and what I need to get better at. But personally, it's something that kind of is always lingering in my head. And I think probably once a month, I start to either look at the business and think about the future. And truthfully, this quarter has been scary because there's a lot of unknowns coming up, right? We are going into Q4, but who the hell knows what 2023 is going to be like? And so I've spent more time thinking about this without clear answers lately. And I think it's more of like, what can I do better as a leader? What are actually the things that I can affect, like can grab onto and make an effect. And that is being a better leader, making my sales managers stronger leaders. Like, where are they lacking? What training do they need? I'm constantly thinking of that. And so, I wouldn't say I have a special routine. I just really try and make room for it. I mean, look, I work out every day. I make room for myself. So like thinking about that, it's an easy analogy, right? Like taking 5 to 10 minutes a week just to think about, your business and how you're going to get better professionally. Like, I owe it to myself.
You have to. Yeah, you have to. Or again, it's, I call it taking care of future Jake. Like when I do these activities that I'm like, because I think sometimes it's so easy to want to do the things where you get the instant, you see the impact. You're right. You have the meeting, you do the thing, you see the impact. But there's a lot of things that you have to make time for in your week to week that if you neglect, it'll always be to the detriment of future you. And I think whatever the routine is, whether you're, Bill Gates or whatever he used to do, where, he used to like go away for a week, which sounds amazing, like to just go away for a week and pontificate. I've got a 4 and a 7-year-old, and I think, my wife would probably murder me if I tried to do that. But I think for any of you out there, finding that routine, I think is just really, really critical. And if you don't take anything away from today's podcast, I would, encourage you to do that. I just encouraged her. I said, I want you to take an hour tomorrow. I want you to look at your calendar for the next month. And I want you to think about the challenges you're having and those and the things in your business or personal life that you need to prioritize to set January up for success. And she's like, I totally need to do this. And I'm like, you absolutely do. Because, if not, you're just going to be on the wheel. The wheel's not going to stop and tell you, and tell you to get off. Many times you're just going to keep executing, and then you're going to look up and go, why am I still doing this? I'm burnt out. It's like, well, yeah, you never fix the problems. And then that's whenever the breakdown happens. And you're just like, I can't do this anymore. And so how are you? So a couple topics here as we kind of like start to wrap up that I think I'm interested in. One, I want to talk about, you mentioned the remote work piece. What are you finding, are the best ways, or how have you thought about building culture, in a remote first environment? I think, again, this is truly unprecedented. No, there is no playbook that exists for this. Anyone who says they have it is full of it. What are the things that you do, or what are the things that you've seen have an impact, on culture?
Connecting more one-on-one with individuals more than ever, right? Like if we were in an office, I definitely wouldn't be having as many one-on-ones, and it's really more of a check-in. Not like, yeah, they're great planned agenda ones, obviously, but more of like, hey, how's it going? What are you working on? What are you struggling with? Those types of one-on-ones I think are key. I think for, those big meetings a week, and we don't have too many where my whole sales team is actually involved. We have one mandatory, but I want you engaged. I just want you on camera, right? We're salespeople. We should want to be on camera and participating in the chat. And so I kind of ask that, like, be present, and if not, then don't come to the meeting and, let us know what's going on. So I think, this might be kind of counterintuitive, but I think, once or twice a year, actually getting together with everybody to get a little bit more, learning from somebody that I just can't get over a Zoom. Just shooting the shit for 5 minutes to kind of see their body language and to see, like how they hold up a conversation just with me as the VP. That's really important. And there's nothing like that. So making sure that's still in the mix somehow for building an online culture is important. But yeah, there's no good playbook. I think, we've tried some things and some work, some don't. But I will say lastly, constantly wanting feedback from the team on what they want to see and what they want to hear. And, if we're doing meetings the right way, I'm one for that anyway, right? I want buy-in. I want to hear people. They should have a voice. And so making sure we kind of do check in there.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and we found something similar. 100%, you have to, the small things. And again, I feel like, again, things have sped up, it almost feels like, right? When you're at home and you got meeting. I don't know about you, but there's weeks I have 50 Zoom meetings. It's crazy. And it's always so difficult at times to just focus on the person. Tune out the noise. I'm not thinking about my next Zoom meeting. How are you? What's going on? Do a little small talk. I promise you will still cover all the topics. Like, but the deposit, the emotional deposit that makes is big time. And I think that's another thing to think about for a lot of people is in the relationship capital. I think when you don't have that face to face, you don't really know, haven't met the person and to kind of really get to like interact with them. The things that you do virtually can take big withdrawals, as well too, where you're like, oh, well, so-and-so never shows up on their camera or things like that, and they don't even know it. Or, the rest of the team doesn't, she's like, why does she get to do this or he get to do this? And I just think all these things, but investing in the person first in a world where it's so easy to focus on the number and the jobs and the next task and the next task, I just feel like is something that will never go, out of style. So the common theme here, and as we, kind of wrap up, the question I want to kind of pose to you here at the end is a common theme for you is leveling up, and leveling up people, their careers, etc. What advice would you give people that are, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but what advice would you give people that are looking to level up their career? And also we can be specific to like these times where, there is a lot of uncertainty in the market and things that are happening. And, the market goes back up and it drops 3% in a day. And, mortgage rates are at all-time highs. And, there is that. Like, what advice would you give to someone who's trying to level up now?
Find a network if you don't have a network yet. I mean, there's so many good ones out there. Just talk with peers and colleagues in the industry, or at least in sales, I think. Find a mentor. It's something that I probably not resisted, but I just didn't do. It took me too long in my career. And I should have done it like at City Search in my 20s. Like, I don't know what I was thinking. And so that to me is massive. Find somebody that you could just have a chat with on Zoom, 30 minutes, an hour, maybe a month, just to kind of talk through things that you're going through and find where the gaps are, find where the learning moments are for you. And sometimes we need assistance with that. Sometimes we need to talk it out to be like, wow, I'm not good at that, or I need to get better at that. And so, aside, like the normal stuff, reading, and that to me that's great, but I like live conversations. I want to like hear from experience. I want to actually talk to somebody that's maybe gone through something similar like myself, again, going into this Q4 and this kind of, we don't know what's going to happen with the world. We can still play off of past experiences and we can still say, right? And we can still say, hey, you know what? This didn't exactly happen. Or I don't know where the world's going to go. But in times of economic downturn, hey, think about ABC. And think about have you planned for 2023 yet? Have you thought about how you're going to increase that growth without a big budget, et cetera? So that to me that just kind of talking it out and being able to kind of, talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, because sales is a grind. Jake, more than I do that it's, you kind of always got to put the pedal on the metal, and you always have to be ready for improvement, and you really have to be, willing to kind of take the hits, if you will, because that's what we have a lot of in sales.
Yeah. Well, I love the advice. I mean, I think it's something I can resonate 100%. When I became a VP for the first time, I look back at the mistakes I made. I'm like, you know what? If I would have had a mentor, I mean, I probably still would have made some of them, let's be honest.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
But I think there's corners that you just can't see around. And I agree. Look, I'm going to tell you, there are going to be people that learn from this experience in COVID back to back. And when times get good, when you learn how to sell in these environments, when I was kind of really getting deep in my professional career, I worked at Career Builder, and then the housing crisis happened. And so I'm selling job postings and, talent solutions to, when Lehman Brothers and these companies are melting down. And, we pivoted quickly, and my team was very successful during that. And it's like, man, does selling during a boom economy become way easier? And, I think a lot of sellers, COVID hit, and then it was like good times, everything, money's flowing, COVID hit, oh my gosh, but good times came back pretty quick. And now it's like, oh, here it is again. So honing your craft and really being thoughtful and smart and strategic, talking to mentors who've been there, I think is awesome advice.
Great.
So love it, Ange. So I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name again. I'm convinced if I do it again, I'm going to butcher it. So, Ange, I want to thank you for joining me today. The conversation was fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Jake, thanks so much for having me. Really had a great conversation and look forward to connecting again in the future.
Amazing. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show. Thank you, everyone, again for listening to another episode. If you are listening all the way to the end, I hope you have left a review. I hope that you make sure that you're following or subscribing on your favorite podcast listening apparatus. We'll be back next Thursday. And again, make sure to check out the Monday episodes as well, too. A lot of people are really enjoying these kind of mini episode Mondays. So make sure to tune in, subscribe, and leave a review.